Good job.
Now call the meeting of the Waco Plan Commission on January 26, 2021 to order. It is now 7:04 p.m. On March 16, 2020, the governor suspended various provisions of the Open Meeting Act pursuant to his state of disaster authority. The change was effective March 16, 2020 until further notice or until the state disaster declaration expires. In accordance with social distancing guidelines and while providing as much transparency as possible, the Waco Plan Commission meeting will be closed to the public attending in person. This meeting is being broadcasted live at www.wccc.tv. The audio is being recorded and the recording will be available to the public. According to the Attorney General, governmental bodies must offer members of the public alternative methods of communication with their public officials. In an effort to allow for such public input as possible to those who wish to speak by phone on public hearings were required to register with planning staff by 12 p.m. on January 26, 2021. We have numerous speakers registered, and each will be allowed to speak for 3 minutes during the appropriate public hearing. The first item is approval of the minutes of our December 14, 2020 work session and business meeting. Are there any changes or additions? Well, seeing none, they stand approved as written. If there are any changes or additions, then they stand approved. So we'll now move on to our public hearing agenda items. First up, we have our subdivisions. Mr. Peters, could you present the subdivisions before us today?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a public hearing to consider the following subdivision plats. Preliminary plat of the Hunters Creek Edition, final plat and construction plans of the Bodie Road Edition, Phase 1, final plat and construction plans of the Kanan Village Edition of PUD, Phase 2, final plat and construction plans of the Lakes at University Parks, Phase 4, and final plat and construction plans of the Southern Heights Edition. Staff has reviewed these plats and recommends approval with conditions on all 5 of these plats, and be happy to answer any questions you have regarding any of the conditions on the plat.
With that, not having any public speakers, anybody here to speak from the public, I'll go ahead and open and close. Do we have any additional questions for the staff? If not, do we have a motion on these items?
I motion that we approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Smith and a second by Mr. Cole. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the commission. If you vote in favor of motion, please raise your hand. If you oppose any motion, please raise your hand. I believe we have a unanimous. So we'll go to see council as a recommendation for approval. Now we move on to our zoning applications. We'll start off with Ms. Peters. Mr. Peters. Ms. Beatrice, Ms. Warden, will we have, I see case number Z-20-71. What is the city staff recommendation?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a public hearing on a request from Jay Tarrenton on behalf of WCW Waco 2 LLC for property at 708 North 9th Street for a special permit on for an automobile car washing establishment in a C2 district. This public hearing was continued from our last meeting in December. We mailed out 16 notices, had 2 returned, 1 in favor and 1 opposed from the new notices, or from the December notices. From the January notices, we had 16 mailed, 0 returned, and 1 email received in opposition. We did also receive an email from the president of the Brook Oaks Neighborhood Association in favor of the request. And we do have the applicant on the line who has registered to speak. Just a moment. When you're ready, Mr. Ramos, you can open the public hearing.
Yeah, well, we'll open the public hearing. We have one public speaker. I believe it's the applicant, Mr. Jay Tarrington. Mr. Tarrington, if you're online, could you state your name and your public address and your comments to the commission?
Yeah, my name is Jay Tarrington. I'm with Watershed Car Washes. And we would like the commission to approve this car wash. At our last hearing, there were some concerns with regard to traffic. And we did a traffic report and turned it in the interim. And it doesn't appear like we have any real issues from the study that was done. So we'd appreciate it if we could get approved tonight and move on to the city council. I would be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Tarrington. Do we have any questions for Mr. Tarrington? Well, any additional questions for city staff? Well, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. We do have a recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have a motion on this issue?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to recommend approval from Mr. Bross, and was a second from Mr. Cole?
Mr. Gretzinger.
Mr. Gretzinger, sorry about that.
No worries.
All right, well, hearing none, if we have any discussions, if you vote in favor for this motion, please raise your hand. If opposed, please raise your hand. It is unanimous. It will go to the council for recommendation for approval. Ms. Warden, in the case of Z-21-1, what is the recommendation of the city?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a public hearing on a request from Xavier and Marcela Garcia for property at 4220 Watt Avenue for a special permit to allow short-term rental type 2 in an R1B district. We mailed out 18 notices and had one returned with concerns. And Planning Services does recommend approval of the request. And I'll read these special provisions and conditions and these findings for items. This applies to items 6 through 10 on the agenda, and then I'll just reference them in the future. So Planning Services recommends approval of the special permit subject to special provisions and conditions and based on the following findings. 1, that the proposed use is consistent with the comprehensive plan. 2, that the proposed use is compatible with the appropriate and orderly development of the area in which it is located. 3, that the proposed use would not be more objectionable to neighboring properties because of traffic congestion, noise, fumes, vibrations, or any other characteristics in any use permitted in the zoning district without the grant of a special exception. And 4, that available community facilities and services, including the road system providing access to the proposed use, are adequate for the proposed use. And these findings are required for the granting of a special permit as per section 28-122 of the City of Waco zoning ordinance.
All right, well, having no public speakers, we'll open and close the public hearing. Do we have any additional questions for city staff? Okay, we do have a recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have a motion on this issue?
Mr. Chair, I would like to point out that we have added one condition to the special provisions and conditions list, that this property would be rented to only one group at a time, as discussed during our work session.
Okay.
So moved.
Second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Gretzinger and a second by Mr. Smith. If you vote in favor of this motion, please raise your hand. If You're opposed? It's unanimous, so go to the council for a recommendation for approval with the condition. In the case of Z-21-2, Ms. Warden, what is the city's recommendation?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a public hearing on a request from Joseph L. Craig and Andrea Michelle Craig for property at 1901 Algonquin Avenue for a special permit to allow a short-term rental type 2 in an R1B district. We mailed out 25 notices and one returned with a prefer not to comment. And Planning Services does recommend approval of the request. Based on the special provisions and conditions and based on the findings that are required for the granting of a special permit as per section 28-122 of the City of Waco zoning ordinance.
We'll now open the public hearing. I believe we have one public speaker, Michelle Craig, which is the applicant. Is Michelle on the line?
I'm sorry, I had to find the unmute.
Yeah. If you could state your name and your public address, and then your comments to the commission.
Yes, my name is Andrea Michelle Craig, and I'm at 1901 Algonquin, there in Waco, Texas, 76707. And I'm just here to answer any questions or concerns that might come up due to the request for the short-term rental.
Well, thank you, Ms. Craig. Do we have any commissioners? Do we have any questions for Ms. Craig? Do we have any additional questions for city staff?
I don't have any additional questions.
Thank you. Well, hearing that, we'll close the public hearing. We do have recommendation of approval from city staff. Do we have any motions on this issue?
I'd like to make a motion to approve based on staff findings and conditions.
Second.
We have a motion approved by Ms. Briscoe and a second by Mr. Smith. Any additional discussion? Okay, we're hearing none. If you vote in favor of this motion, please raise your right hand. And against, if you oppose this motion, please raise your hand. Well, this will go to the council for a recommendation for approval. Ms. Warden, in the case of Z-21-3, what is the recommendation of the city staff?
Yes, Mr. Chair and members of the commission, this is a request from Christopher, this is a public hearing on a request from Christopher Button for property at 2217 North 44th Street for a special permit to allow a short-term rental type 2 in an R1B district. We mailed out 24 notices, had 2 returned, one with no comment and one with concerns but no objection. And Planning Services recommends approval of the special permit subject to special provisions and conditions and based on the findings required for the granting of a special permit as per section 28-122 of the City of Waco zoning ordinance.
Well, having no public speakers, we'll open and close the public hearing. Do we have any additional questions for the city staff? We have a recommendation for approval from the city staff. Do we have any motions on the issue?
Motion to approve based on city staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion approved by Mr. Cole and a second by Mr. Smith. If you vote in favor for the motion, please raise your hand. If you oppose, please raise your hand. Vote is unanimous, so we'll go to the council for recommendation for approval. Ms. Warden, in the case of Z-21-4, what is the recommendation of the city staff?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a request from Joseph D. Garvelli and Meredith Blake Garvelli for property at 100 Creek Ridge Drive for a special permit to allow bed and breakfast homestay establishment in an R1B district. We mailed out 11 notices and had 1 returned with no objections, and did receive 1 email in opposition to the request. And Planning Services recommends approval of the special permit subject to special provisions and conditions and based on the findings required for the granting of a special permit as per section 28-122 of the City of Waco zoning ordinance.
Okay, I believe we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I believe we have 1 public speaker, which is the applicant, Mr. Garbelli. Is he on the line right now? Mr. Garbelli, if you're on the line, can you go ahead and state your name and your public address and state your comments to the commission?
This is Joseph Garvelli at 100 Creek Ridge. I was here to answer questions if any of my neighbors had asked to speak, and none of them did. So I'd like you to approve based on the city planner's recommendation. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Garbelli. Do we have any questions from the commission for Mr. Garbelli? Any additional questions for city staff? Ms. Wharton, you said this was going to be a recommendation for approval with conditions, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so we have a recommendation for approval with condition from city staff. Do we have a motion on the issue?
Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval of Z-21-4 based upon conditions and staff findings.
I second that.
We have a motion from Mr. Gomez and a second by Mr. Gretzinger. If you vote in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. And the vote is unanimous. If you oppose the motion, please raise your hand. This motion will go to the recommendation for approval to the council. Okay, Ms. Wharton, in the case of Z-21-5, what is the recommendation of the city staff?
Mr. Chair, I'm actually going to take over on this one. This is a public hearing on a request from Walker Partners LLC on behalf of LG Kanan LLC on a property located at Panther Way between Ritchie Road and Farmilla Road, which is phase 2 being located northwest of intersection of Pelifox Drive and Slocum Court, which is a 22.094 acre tract of land located in the Marble Survey, Abstract 580 in the city of Waco, McLennan County, Texas, and being a portion of the remainder of the called 151.173 acre tract described in a detail, G. Callan, LLC, recorded under McLennan County Clerk's document 2015-023-163, the official public records of the McLennan County, Texas. This is for approval of the final planning and development plan. We did mail out 28 notices and had 1 return in opposition. Planning Services does recommend approval of the final PUD plan based on the following findings and conditions. Findings is 1, the final PUD plan is consistent with the approved concept PUD plan, conditions of the approved concept PUD plan, and the requirements of the PUD ordinance. 2, the circulation plan, public facility and service plans, preliminary architectural plan, and site development and landscaping plans included in the final PUD are adequate. We do have 2 conditions. 1, the property must be platted, meeting the requirements of the PUD and subdivision ordinance before the issuance of building permits. And 2, per the approved concept plan, an 8-foot privacy fence must be installed adjacent to the properties, the property lines for the properties located in the Stanford Oaks addition.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. We'll now open up the public hearing. I believe we have 3 speakers scheduled, starting with the applicant, which is the client manager, which is Jacob Bell. Mr. Bell, when you're online, could you state your name and address, your public address, and your comments to the commission?
Yes, sir. My name is Jacob Bell with Walker Partners. Address is 823 Washington Avenue. We are the engineer and surveyor on behalf of LG Callan LLC, the owner and developer. Obviously, we're here to speak for this item and would be happy to answer any questions. This is 176 acre master plan community. Phases 1A and 1B have recently wrapped up, and phase 2 is the one that is before you. And so it's really same song, second verse. We really have not changed anything from the original plan. The concept PUD that was approved for the overall development, we're following suit. We have no problem with the two conditions that Mr. Peters mentioned of the plans being approved and the 8-foot privacy fence. So with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Commission, do we have any questions for Mr. Bell? Having none, we'll go to our next speaker, which is Jonathan Kanan, which is project engineer and applicant. Mr. Kanan, if you could state your name and your public address and state your comments to the commission.
Actually, he's not listed on here.
Okay. I had him on the list that was sent out earlier for 3 speakers. Do we have I think the next speaker we have for this case was going to be Heather Hildebrand?
Yes, she's on here.
Okay. Ms. Hildebrand, if you could state your name and your public address and then state your comments to the commission.
She's muted.
Ms. Hildebrand? I can see her on the screen, but not able to hear. Well, moving on, do we have any additional questions for?
Jacob just emailed saying they're not.
Just clarification. The other 2 registered speakers who were Jonathan Kanan and Heather Hildebrand, they're not speaking since they're also representing Walker Partners as Jacob Bell was.
Okay. All right. Well, do we have any additional questions for the city staff? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. I believe we have a recommendation for approval with conditions from the city staff.
That's correct.
With this, do we have a motion on the issue?
I move to approve based on staff findings.
Second.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Bross and a second by Mr. Cole. Any more discussion? Hearing none. If you vote in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. We have unanimous. So if you oppose the motion, please raise your hand. This will go to the council for recommendation for approval. Pertinent in the case Z-21-7, what is the recommendation of the city staff?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This is a public hearing request from Ryan Lindsay, a property located at 9114 Royal Lane, to rezone from C3 to R3C. We mailed out 17 notices on this one and had 1 email return in opposition, but no cards sent back. Planning Services recommends approval of the zoning change based on the following findings. 1, the proposed zoning is keeping with the land use component of the comprehensive plan. 2, the public infrastructure is adequate to provide for uses allowed in the R3C zoning district. 3, the property meets all the area and width requirements for R3C. And 4, there's R3 zoning in the vicinity of subject property.
All right. We'll now open the public hearing. I believe we have 1 public speaker, which is Sterling Thompson. Sterling, if you're on the line, could you state your name and your public address, then state your comments to the commission?
Yes, my name is Sterling Thompson at 2416 Columbus Avenue. I'm the architect for the property owner, and we would like to request a rezone to R3B from C3. This property was formerly a nursing home, and the owner would like to turn it into some apartments. There'll be basically one bedroom and a handful of 2-bedroom apartments. Really no more units or bedrooms there than were previously there at the nursing home. So I'm here to answer any questions you might have, but we plan on doing some pretty extensive renovations of the property and think it'll be a good addition to the neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Commission, do we have any questions for Mr. Thompson? Do we have any additional questions for the city staff? Well, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. And we do have a recommendation for approval from city staff. Do we have a motion?
Motion we approve based on staff recommendations.
Second.
We have a motion approved by Mr. Cole and a second by Mr. Smith. Any additional discussion? Hearing none, if you vote in favor of the motion, please raise your right hand. If you oppose, please raise your hand. This motion will go as a recommendation for approval to council. And I think that ends our zoning, and we go to abandonment. Mr. Peters, in the case of ABD-21-1, what is the recommendation of city staff?
Yes, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the commission, this is a public hearing on a request from Florence Scattergood on behalf of St. Albans Episcopal Church for the abandonment of a right-of-way along Highway 84 Waco Drive, described as a 0.027 acres, 1,169 square feet in the city of Waco, McLennan County, Texas, and being a remainder of a portion of Barnard Avenue, as shown on a plat recorded in volume 353, page 592 of the deed records in McLennan County, Texas. We mailed out 13 notices and had 0 returned. Let me get to that. Planning Services recommends approval of the abandonment based on the following findings and subject to the following condition. Findings are public use of the right-of-way is not required for proper flow of traffic or for emergency vehicle access to the area, and that utility access for surrounding property is not adversely impacted by the abandonment of the right-of-way. We do have one condition, that a utility easement be retained for the area of the abandoned right-of-way. There is some Atmos Energy facilities in there that need to retain the easement.
Thank you, Ms. Peters. We'll now open the public hearing. I believe we have one public speaker scheduled. The applicant for St. Albans Episcopal Church, Florence Scattergood.
Yes.
Could you state your name for the commission and your public address and then your comments?
Absolutely. My name is Florence Scattergood. I reside at 2629 Cedar Ridge Road in Waco, and I'm representing St. Albans Episcopal Church in our request for the abandonment on the small sliver of land, which is a remainder of a portion of what was once Barnard Avenue. The church owns the entire block bordered by Waco Drive, 29th Street, Columbus, and 30th, except for this small sliver of land. It's our hope that the council will approve our request so we may incorporate this small piece of land into our campus and develop it accordingly. Thank you for your attention and consideration of this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Scattergood. Commission, do we have any questions for Ms. Scattergood? Do we have any additional questions for the city staff? Well, hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. We do have a recommendation for approval from city staff. Do we have a motion on this issue?
I recommend approval based on staff recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion to recommend approval by Mr. Smith and second by Ms. Briscoe. Do we have any additional discussion? We're hearing none. If you vote in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. If you oppose of the motion, please raise your hand. It was unanimous. We'll go to the recommendation, go to the council as a recommendation for approval. Well, I believe that concludes our agenda for this evening. Does staff have anything else for us?
That's all we have.
If not, this meeting will be adjourned.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.